Hi, this is Priyanka, and I welcome you all to Srijan Wednesday webinars. For those of you who are attending for the first time, this is a community initiative by Srijan Technologies. As a part of this initiative, we host webinars every alternate Wednesday. We invite experts from different domains who talk on subjects like front-end technologies, UI/UX, mobile apps, media, entrepreneurship, digital marketing, and many more. Today we will learn about the different kinds of approaches that teams can take to absorb a reasonable amount of uncertainty and to strike a balance between robustness and speed within the sprint. Our expert today will share how you can deal with pivot in lean product development phase, where a product has to go through multiple course corrections in terms of vision, market segment, and features. And since this is almost an emergency on the business side, he will also share how engineering teams can do course correction in their approach to deal with such scenarios. I would now like to introduce our speaker for today's webinar. We have with us Avinash Shiralike. Avinash is a lean and agile coach and has been consulting clients in India, US, Europe, and Australia. He has successfully taken multiple products to market and has been very successful in building various distributed Scrum teams across geographies. He also runs an awesome blog on Agile and Scrum methodologies, and you can check that out at agilebuddha.com. So while you get hooked on to Avinash's presentation, don't forget to take this conversation live on Twitter using our hashtag SrijanWW. You can share your thoughts by tagging us and Avinash in your tweet using our handles @Srijan and @AgileBuddha. So without taking up any more time, let's get started. Avinash, over to you.
Hey guys, welcome to the webinar. So myself, Avinash, we are going to discuss today, that of course the webinar topic is about how to deal with emergencies on a lean/Scrum team. So we're going to discuss, specifically taking up a lot of scenarios and what are the different approaches that we could take. So before we go ahead, as Priyanka mentioned, please use Twitter handle and start tweeting about the things that you'd like to, you're interested in. And definitely, you can, as we move forward, when we have a lot of questions, then we can actually answer post all my slides, then I can take up all of these questions and start answering them. Okay, so before we move on quickly, let me introduce myself. So I got around, been working in a lot of IT product and service companies in various leadership roles for around 18 plus years, and been coaching for last 5-6 years. Is mainly focused on a lot of coaching, transformation, consulting, training, conducting workshops, both at the team level and at executive management level. I do share all my specific experiences, my own opinions, some of the things that I do research on, all of these topics on my blog, which is agilebuddha.com, and been involved in different geographies, playing different kind of roles from business to technology to more or less in all business function areas. Few of my passions are mainly no schooling my daughter, organic farming, natural birthing techniques, no vaccinations, and a lot of some of these are my interest areas. And I live in Goa, India. Okay, with such a short description of myself, let us get into more detail about the topic that we are planning to go for today. So just to build some level of the context, in terms of what was the state of the industry and where are we heading towards. So traditionally, even a lot of waterfall projects do happen till now, right? There are many companies who are still in that, doing a lot of waterfall projects. But what has been my experience has been, a lot of time the development team never had to deal with maintenance because it was always a separate team which was handling maintenance, right? So, even lot of my projects, when I was a developer, I never had to worry about, what's going to happen when it gets into maintenance, what are the issues that might come up. I'd never need to bother about it because I knew that somebody else will take care of it. So almost you can say that all the maintenance team have to deal with all the nonsense as a developer I have created, right? So almost so we could say as, developer had all the fun without any hangover afterwards. So which is this situation changes drastically when we move into agile way of execution, agile way of executing projects. Because we start delivering so early in our cycle and very frequent deliveries. And that means almost our maintenance or enhancements and some level of support starts right after a couple of sprints. Sometimes it could be as early as 2 or 3 sprints. It could be after around 6-7 sprints, but very early in the life cycle of the project, which is quite a different challenge for an agile team, which we are going to discuss what are the different approaches that we could take to address this. And another problem that you face is when you're already working on a project, you got long-term features that you're building, but you're also getting a lot of maintenance, support, enhancements, kind of things coming across from different parts of the from the production user, from different stakeholders. So the planning becomes really hard for the upcoming sprints. To say with considerable level of predictability, how can I forecast what can I complete in upcoming sprints if you have got a lot of these maintenance kind of activities happening. So this is a real challenge for an agile team on any kind of long-term product development. So as we see, I'm pretty sure you might agree with me, any product you get into, a lot of production incidents do happen as soon as we go live. It could be P0, P1 priority ones, and a lot of even unplanned mayhem starts, start consuming teams' time, which comes in a way to achieve sprint goals. So there could be many such examples. The things could be like, as soon as you go, other than just, the things has gone down because of some, either somebody hacked your website or your application to some major functionality defects coming in, which might have missed through your UAT. There could be many other reasons. Other than that, also there could be, the real stakeholders, the users, the sales, the marketing people of your product could be interested in very specific feature, to really, and they want it very soon, right? How do we handle such kind of scenarios really within a sprint, which you are working on a long-term, specific release goals? So the goal is to observe reasonable amount of uncertainty that exists within a sprint, striking a right balance between the robustness of solution that we are building and the speed, which is very, very key for any agile team. You should welcome change, but you should also build a solution which is robust enough, and also you are able to go to market as early as possible. So one of the approaches, we are going to talk about multiple different approaches, so let's start with one. So say the approach one, the focus is on perform, triage, and reject. So one of the major thing that you always need to see is this whenever a request comes in, is this a real production emergency at all? Because many times I've experienced they are not real production emergencies. So I can give you examples like some of the non-incidents are sales team coming with say guys, I got a deal to sign with Sourceforce. I want this small piece of landing page plus XYZ things to be done. This is the deal of the century. I need to get this done now. Can we do it tomorrow? Second, stakeholders upgrading a normal request to production emergency so that in an attempt to bypass a backlog negotiation, because this happens quite a lot. I've seen stakeholders coming and saying, this is really important to me. can you get it done now, so that you don't get into a negotiation when it gets into the backlog. You get prioritized, you negotiate on the value of it, you get into that level. They try to bypass this by upgrading the normal request into as if it is a production emergency or it's a business emergency many times. So I'm not saying there could be genuine need. Okay, there could be genuine need on business many times, but that does not make it classify under production emergency. So it has to go through its life cycle, get into the product owner, prioritize, let it go through, there's a business value to it, and then the team starts picking up from the backlog. So one strong real need is a very strong product owner to do very good level of triage and reject the request which is not relevant. Okay, so when I'm saying actually when say reject, it could be that there could be multiple ways of handling it. Either you put it back to the backlog, let it get prioritized, something you think can be done right away, which is very small. This one you could pick it up. I will talk about some of those approaches too. So if it is a really genuine production request, then definitely you have to fix it. More often issues require more stronger decisive PO who can convince stakeholders about whether it's why it is not so really so important to the product. Okay, so which is one of the grave concern in the industry also, to find a very good product owner who can have manage multiple stakeholders, who has got great decision making and who can negotiate with multiple stakeholders to with the always one eye always focused on ROI of what we are planning to do. So one of the arguments which has worked for me is it so urgent? Can we wait for 2 weeks? Say your sprint duration is 2 weeks. Always say, it's just, can you wait just for 2 more weeks? You will have it in your product. Or if it's your sprint length is 1 more week, it makes it much easier to have this kind of conversation. So that's the other way, one of the ways that we could address this problem. So let's look at the second approach, which is, you perform the triage and actually defer the fix until next sprint. Some issues are there in the system for a long time, but when they are found, need an immediate fix. I'm pretty sure you might have seen this. You might have asked these questions. Guys, can you tell me when did you find this problem? No, this was there in the product for long, but I just found it, so I need an immediate fix. So if there was already there in the product for long, it means we can easily wait for 1 more sprint, right? Unless it's so important. If it's, so such issues can be pushed to later sprints, and having a short sprint duration is very useful in such negotiations. So, one of the decision, next to the decision of rejection, a good PO will make sure that everything that can be deferred will be deferred, okay, to later sprints. Not only just rejecting something which is, and if something could be deferred to later sprints, put it as part of the backlog. Let it bring as part of your N+1 or N+2 planning. The third is, which is another interesting technique which a lot of teams I have asked to use this approach, is following a kind of a 80-20 principle. Assuming that you have done solution 1 and 2, which we have talked, okay, the approaches 1 and 2, whatever left after doing approach 1 and 2 are real issues that have to be fixed soon. So one way to handle is, reserve a good level of buffer, either in terms of, points or time, if you're using any of those for capacity planning, for such kind of unplanned work. Start with 80% capacity for your planned, features that you are building within a sprint, and 20% for any kind of unplanned emergency. And this is to start with, because when you're first devising a sprint, you may not know whether 20% is less or it's high. So what you need to do is you'll start with 20%, and then gradually with sprint on sprint, you'll start evaluating whether it's really consuming 20% or can I reduce it to 15. That's a level of fine tuning that you need to do with your sprint, as we move forward. So this is one very good way to address, where you actually clearing out at the start itself that there is a 20% buffer specifically focused on, addressing any kind of emergencies. So keep this in mind, which when we say buffer, it's very, very important. How do we manage that buffer? One of the ways is, if the buffer is more than 1/5 of your velocity, 1/5 of your, say your velocity is 30, whatever, 1/5 of it, keep it only to that. If not, it will create a very big gap in the capacity planning. Okay, try to keep that, you know, buffer only to that level. And buffer is not for backlog items. Keep this in mind. Buffer, what we have talked, is mainly for production emergencies that might come up. Okay, and buffer needs to be protected from unintended use. You know, stakeholders a lot of time, you know, smell a workaround in the regular process when they see a buffer. Oh, you know what? They have got a 20%. Let me push this important feature out into the 20%. Okay, so definitely you need to perform a very good triage there. And definitely start measuring the buffer overflow or underflow, so that you can start doing better, you know, sprints in, you know, better planning in the upcoming sprints. Okay, moving on. So one of the key things when we are actually doing all of these approaches is not to forget the approaches that we are taking is a more of reactive manner, but we have to be proactive in actually making sure the next time such kind of issues don't come up, right? Which most of the time we, you know, in a heat of the sprint, we forget to take, you know, start thinking about the root causes. There are multiple ways to find a root cause for a problem, you know. So assuming that we have done solutions in an order of like whatever we discussed, like solution 1 about triage, solution 2 about, you know, deferring into the you know, next sprint. You know, you have done all this in order to control the damage. Then you need to make sure is identify the root cause to the problems that are coming up. You know, if there is a say 20% buffer you have kept and it's every time it's consuming your 20%, then it means there is a problem, right? Which needs to be fixed. You can't continue going on, hey, you know, my planning is great, you know, it's just consuming whatever I'm planning for. But if it becomes a trend, then you need to see why it is consuming 20% every time. Probably there's something that we need to fix in the way we are building the product, right? Probably our engineering practices, our testing, you know, probably might need to upgrade the way of, you know, writing, you know, multiple things. Either want to go towards more of behavior-driven development. There could be many areas by which you can actually start addressing, you know, missed scenarios, which result as defects on the systems on production. So one of the key aspects here is build the quality right from the start, right? Which is a more of a lean philosophy. You know, see the quality as not as one person on a team, but everybody contributes towards the quality. You know, from product owner, it's all about, right, how good good quality stories that he's writing, what's the level of acceptance criteria that's been written, towards how well it's described very well, how team's quality of asking questions to analyze the, you know, requirements, a lot of these factors, and then engineering practices, our testing abilities, manual automation, a lot of these factors actually contribute towards quality. And if you ever run into this buffer overflow problem of, you know, consistently a lot of emergencies coming up quite often and eating up the buffer and more, then I don't think you should continue with the sprint. Rather, you should abort the sprint and spend that sprint focus on fixing the root causes for those problems that are coming up, so that you start getting into a state of flow in the coming sprints. When I say state of flow, when you are able to work in one flow towards the development without getting distracted by maintenance and, you know, urgent requests. And for root causes, you can also check on my blog. There are, you know, root cause analysis you could do using techniques like 5 whys. You can check it out. I've written a lot of examples about how to conduct 5 why techniques to do root cause analysis. Okay, so quick time check. Okay, great, we are on time. So moving on. So one of the key aspects when you are actually looking for any level of team sizing, team staffing, is a small team performs better as it has very less overhead, but it's less robust against losing people. Okay, so losing people could be anything to an extent of there is an emergency, one person has to go on and medical leave towards one person has to leave on a short notice. It could be anything. So which actually industry calls it as like a truckload factor. So a 10% team losing one person is like 10% productivity loss, which could still be absorbed with some level of good management, self-organized team able to manage the things and still pulling off a sprint. If it's one of those cases. Is simple mathematics, right? 3% team means in one person losing is 33% kind of loss in capacity. So keep that in mind in terms of designing your team. So it should be small enough to absorb the overhead, but large enough to absorb some loss, both. So let's look at the the fifth approach, how we could actually handle such emergencies. This is also has been a great way a lot of teams has been doing, applying more of must have, should have, could have, won't have principle. This applies a lot at the product backlog level, not only at the sprint backlog, more at the product backlog. But when you are pulling the things from product backlog to sprint, you could always say include the must haves and at least some should haves in the sprint, so that the should haves becomes your buffer. Okay, so in case nothing comes out, no production emergency, nothing, you guys are doing very well, then you are just going ahead with your sprint flow, which is kind of completing all of must-haves and should-haves. But if there is an emergency, then the PO has to decide whether that emergency is more or less important than the should-have stories that you have on in the sprint. If they are, then if that's more important than them, then he can easily swap them with similar size item from the should have. So that keeps the team overall capacity same, and still gets the benefit of a buffer, and still you have the benefit of able to address any last minute production emergencies without impacting your sprint goals. You still go ahead and meet your, you still have delivered at least the must-haves, whatever required for the sprint, which is the key aspect, in terms of planning your sprints. So, and the sixth approach, which is, which could be used in multiple ways, which is, moving towards more of Kanban kind of thinking, which you are actually going to, so this is more useful if the team is doing more maintenance than new features. Okay, if you're mainly working on a lot of maintenance, you need a very finer control on every story level prioritization. A lot of stories get decided, a lot of defects might come at the last minute. There are too many such dynamics happening, and and you might be working on a legacy product, a lot of defects needs to fix. There are multiple scenarios, right? So that's the place where you could actually switch from a Scrum team towards Kanban. Okay, may not be for always, for few sprints, for a few weeks, you are on Kanban, things get settled, things are fine, in good shape, come back to, Scrum. And how I would have done in a couple of places has been, we were working on a product for 6 months, around 4 to 5 months, we went live, and then, suddenly divided the team into two teams. One is called Scrum team and second is Kanban team. The Scrum team was focusing on long-term product roadmap features, whereas the Kanban team was focused more on very short-term changes, any small, maintenance-related things, or it could be, things like very small requests coming from sales, marketing, product sales, marketing teams. Such kind of smaller requests are handled by the Kanban team, and all long-term features handled by Scrum team. This made, the Scrum team not to get distracted so much with all such small requests coming in. It gave a very good flow to them, and the Kanban team, of course, was, and of course, you need to do some things of, typical things like, you need to rotate the people on the team, a lot of those things so that people get sufficient experience. But this is one of the ways, you could do it. And Kanban works very well. You can actually start measuring cycle time. There are a lot of aspects. You could go ahead and read more if you guys are new to Kanban. How to really eliminate the bottlenecks in the pipeline, how to achieve a flow, and how to improve your cycle time from defect to production live. All of a lot of advantages that you get going to Kanban. So in terms of these are the different, around 6 different approaches, mainly focused on addressing production emergencies, right? Whenever it could be an emergency which is in disguise of a actual feature request, so which you need to do with a good triage. But these are the 5-6 different kinds of techniques that you could use. Keep in mind, these are all these different tricks are dependent on context, situation of the project, situation of the product where you are, how the team is working, what's your relationship with the client or with the product owner. A lot of these factors do play in depending upon what these options. So you need to have all these as a Scrum Master or as a team, Scrum team, you need to have this broad range of options to choose from when you're actually having this kind of an emergencies on the team. So, which I talked about, if it's a large team, then you can always go with approach of, breaking them into 2 teams of, one more of Scrum team, which is called strategic team, Kanban as more of tactical team, focus on short-term, small support fixes, maintenance, and, small enhancements. So these are the 6 different approaches which I want to talk, very focused on the production, emergency handling. So my next one, this is more from a production angle, right? Production emergency, what are the different ones? The next one is, lot of times on a product, we run into, you have built a great product, assuming with your own assumption of a market, but you go with a, very, very soon into the market and you realize that the people are not really hardly caring for your product. They're hardly seeing any level of adoption happening on the product. So it's a time, it's a big emergency from a business angle, because you have built a product. You might have a great product, but you may not have a right market to that product yet. Okay, or you might be addressing a wrong market segment, which you need to rework. So this state, from a perspective of lean startup, is called pivot. So where you need to now make some course corrections in terms of your vision of the product or the market segment you are addressing, or the kind of features that you have developed within your product. Okay, so either of these, now you need to make a drastic change in your direction of the product, which is pivot, which is called pivot. So product team, when we enter into this state on any product, the product team must be damn good with product discovery. More of when I'm talking about discovery is about analyzing what people really need, what real users want out of the product, what are the real business problem, and how could we solve it. So you might go back and start reworking with your user base, your new market segment, and one of the key aspect here is your ability to do as many iterations of idea as possible before you run out of money. So because as you in a pivot, then one of the key aspect is the money starts burning now, because you are having a team which has to now play with different ideas. You don't know which of those ideas will actually click with market segment, right? So you need to really speeden up your going to market with a more of, I'm going to talk about the build, measure, learn feedback loop very soon. So before you run out of money or the management's run out of patience, in terms of whether they are found any real good idea in terms of the product. So keep in mind, this is this kind of challenge has happened to all famous products. As I see in on my this one, you should go and I will share this presentation. You should definitely read about all these stories about Twitter, Flickr, Groupon, Nokia. There are many such companies which has gone through, which started with a new business and they ended on a new business, which very successful businesses. Okay, so because the key aspect is really figuring out who really cares about your incredible new product. Okay, that's your main problem which you need to address even before. So many times I even suggest you don't need to build a product. You need to test your product even before building it. That's one of the key aspects to figure out what really market wants. Okay, so this definitely a lot of you people might have already know about lean startup from Eric Rice, might have read the book. So he presents this very good idea about build, measure, learn, right? So one of the key aspect here is you describe an hypothesis. You have got your own hypothesis of what particular market segment is, what customers want. You with your own set of assumptions. you do a quick check with a small prototype into the market to see whether what they really looking for from this, the prototype that you are building, and get that feedback, measure that feedback, and learn and analyze what people are liking it, what not, and gradually, iterate through these ideas till the time you get a final refinement of the product idea, what really people want. So this loop is called build, measure, learn. Here, very interesting aspect that you need to see here, in case of Scrum, we use, we should start measuring velocity of the team, which is more of a delivery velocity, the speed at which we are delivering the features. But when we have to switch into a more of a startup side of the things, more of seeing it from a lean startup, I would say we should actually start measuring something like a learning velocity. In the sense, you should see how soon I'm able to learn my market. Okay, the speed at which I'm able to understand my market, understand my users, understand. Okay, so this, sadly, we don't have any, you can't, quantify this from a perspective of stories or points or anything. But it's only can be done by having a very, very fast, short sprints going to the market very soon, and understanding them, getting the feedback, and you're increasing your learning with every such iteration going to the market. Okay, one of the very good ideas, videos that I have seen, you should definitely go and check it out on your YouTube. When you are doing any such kind of discovery of the product, it could look like a little like this team. It's called the Nordstorm Innovation Labs. They did a very interesting, the way of, this build, measure, learn. Definitely watch this video. It's only of around 4 or 5 minutes. You'll get a very interesting way how they did really this kind of technique, to understand the real user needs. Okay, so sorry, just okay. So now, when a particular business gets into this pivot mode, right? There is a lot of engineering impact that you see, because the team which are working on a typical Scrum fashion, has to make some changes in the way they are addressing the problem. Now, instead of, they need to make a lot of such correction into the way they are to deal with such kind of uncertainty from the business angle, right? Instead of developing, rather I would say stop developing new features now without really validating your market, okay, what you really want to build. So you need to stop picking up any set of new features, rather focus more on prototyping multiple new ideas with a very quick turnaround, so that the turnaround in terms of trying to reduce the build, measure, learn loop, feedback loop. And many times you might end up building something more demoable over shippable features, because it may not be that everything that you're building when you're in a pivot, because it's all prototype hypothesis, it might be demoable for a different set of user segments, market segments, and may not be shippable. Okay, which is a very interesting twist comes from a Scrum moving towards more of a, from a lean angle. If I start looking at here, you have to switch the coin completely, where you're focusing more on demoable rather than shippable features. Till the time you hit the sweet spot where you start building some kind of shippable features. And a lot of time, the engineering team has to, prefer to go for speed over perfection in case of engineering solutions. It could be multiple examples. Could be, sometimes you don't need to, like as I mentioned here, you don't need to focus more on building generic solutions or frameworks for a particular hypothesis of your business. You can rather build something really quick by, even if you want to do it with some level of hard coding, just build something so that you showcase to your user. If they like it, then come back and start building it in a more generic way. Okay, after multiple such users actually validate your idea. Okay, so there is a constant, there's a turn is more towards speed rather than perfection here. Okay, and definitely the changes like I faced recently also on one of the project teams, where we stopped automating some of the which we used to do when we are till the time we reached to a point of pivot, and now we stopped automating the test because it doesn't make sense to automate something which we are just building for hypothesis sake. right? Till the time it actually flows into the product as a feature. So many such examples that you need to change the outlook, or you need to retune yourself towards that the product is not in a way that you were expecting earlier. Now it's in a different stage, which is pivot. So idea, mainly thing is all about idea generation, validating those ideas, with going to market really quick. Okay, whatever it takes to do that. So and this is one of the places where you can actually, because at this time the product really lacks roadmap, because you don't know your segment, so you really don't have a very strong roadmap in front of you. So moving to very short sprints, like 1 week sprint, or to a more of like a flow model like Kanban, really helps, or helps in reducing the build, measure, learn feedback loop. Okay, so that's more or less the shift changing from Agile, Scrum towards Lean suddenly. So you might see, interestingly, a lot of startups may not even have a full knowledge of Agile, Scrum, but they need to know this idea about Lean startup, wherein you start building that kind of build, measure, learn loop very early in the cycle. Once you have got a lot of validated ideas, then you can get into a more of Scrum way of fashion of building, because then you have a product roadmap, start building in that fashion. Okay, so a lot of interesting ways that you could do in this kind of prototyping ideas. It could be as simple as paper prototypes towards more of a lot of balsamic kind of prototypes, very low fidelity prototypes too. Or you could also build very simple applications with holding one set of data, simple JS application, nothing, no backend, nothing, just building such kind of prototype, and in something which can be done very quick and very fast, very easily you can build it. You can take up all such kind of ways to actually build this. Okay, so I think that's all which I wanted to talk today regarding more of from the production emergencies, and also from the pivot, and how to handle and what are the impacts from the engineering angle. So thanks guys for being with me till now. I'm open for questions, so please start dropping your questions on the chat window, on the questions tab, and Priyanka will collate those questions. And Priyanka, over to you. Could you please collate those questions if you guys have anyone, and then I will start picking up one by one.
Thanks a lot, Avinash. That was a great session. And thank you so much for sharing how people can plan for production and development emergencies better during the sprint. I'm sure our participants would now be able to deal with their emergencies more tactfully. Moving on, we have already received a couple of questions, but I would still request all participants to please type in any questions that you have in the chat box below, or you can actually press the raise hand button on your control panel if you want to ask your question using your microphone. So I will get started with the first question here. Our first question is from Martin, who wants to know, I think using Moscow inside a sprint could increase the overall risk of the project on the long run, since you could be leaving M features out to create a buffer. What do you think?
Okay, Martina. So one of the wise thing that the sprint team must definitely do is not to leave any must-have features, right? So that's the you need to figure out. It should not be a scenario where you have done within a sprint all the should-have features and you're not delivered some must-haves, right? So it can't take that way. So what I have seen teams doing it is, when you have such kind of must-haves and should-haves within a sprint, it's very less. It could be 10-15% of should-haves. Then rather at start of the sprint, they start picking up all the must-have features, right? So must-have stories, so that they start, and they don't even, of course, in a lot of Scrum teams, they don't even wait till end to do. They do very frequent push out for product owner to take a look at all the must-have features. So that's a better approach to take, where you start addressing all the must-have at the early part of the sprint, so that when you enter into the later part of the sprint, you left with only should-haves to be achieved. Should-haves to be delivered. So I would rather take that kind of an approach, and this is one of the approaches. That's how we could address it. I hope this answers your question.
Thank you so much, Avinash. Martin, if you have a follow-up question, please feel free to type in. Our next question is by Sandeep, who wants to know, apart from the production emergencies, many times there are a lot of queries from the customers which need to be addressed during the sprint. Any suggestion on how to handle these situations better apart from the buffer approach?
Okay, so in terms of, it depends a lot of time, it's I would have gone more detail here because there are a lot, when you say a lot of questions coming from the customers, it could be many times as, if it's a lot of business clarifications or business questions, and how would you do this feature, a lot of those kind of things probably, if you got a very able Scrum Master can handle these kind of questions. But I would also say, if you're getting, a lot of many of such things should come up in your product backlog grooming sessions, right? Wherein, if product backlog grooming sessions happens within a sprint, which is mainly focused on N+1, N+2 planning, there ideally a lot of your customer questions or product owner asking questions or any of those should come up there for clarification. So I would suggest taking approach of having a grooming sessions every time. Go back and take a look at the, probably on my blog or on even Scrum guide about the backlog grooming session, which I think you are aware of. If not, drop me an email. I will, give you some idea about the backlog grooming sessions. And second, is the Scrum Master able to handle some of the business clarifications? And if it's, sometimes you might have, a couple of hours or in a sprint where you want to pull in your technical lead or your, developer on the team to address those questions. That's the only way that you could address, but definitely you need to say no to unrealistic demands that are coming up within a sprint, right? So if the question is so important, you need to think, does it require teams time in actually spending time to do some level of POCs before answering it? You need to say, can we do it as part of our upcoming sprint or part of our backlog grooming session, where we can, as a team, we will all sit together and we'll take up those queries, and not take things one by one as the things come up as part of day-to-day matters. I hope this answers your question, Sandeep.
All right, thanks. Just another quick reminder, guys, please take this conversation live and share your thoughts with us on Twitter using our hashtag SrijanWW, and don't forget to tag us at our handle @Srijan. Our next question is by Abhishek, who wants to know, what should we do when we are not getting frequent requests from users when adopted Kanban initially? Perhaps we adopted Kanban seeing the flow of requests, but later on it reduced to a large extent, and after another couple of months it raised again and then dropped. So it seems like it's a series of raising and dropping of the requests. So what should be done in this case, Avinash?
Abhishek, I think I completely don't get your question when you say the request coming down and up, because it's, I hope you're talking about your, within a company, your own product, and the users not responding to it. If that's the question, or not really raising, but then you have a product roadmap for yourself. It means then you have got a roadmap, you're delivering on that roadmap, because there is a product strategy team which might be working with your real users, and they might be already answering some of those questions. You might, as an engineering team, may not be actually. I don't know your scenario, so pardon me if it's not right on track. But if you're part of the engineering team, there could be product team which might be already taking up those and doing that level of filtering already. So switching to Kanban is more of the scenario that we talked about, a lot of maintenance, or you might have a 24/7 NOC team, network operation centers, or support maintenance kind of teams, level 1, level 2 kind of. Those are all the people who are best fit for Kanban. And if not, I would still suggest go for a sprint model with whatever 10% kind of buffer to handle any level of such urgent user requests that might be coming up.
Okay, so
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, so he's elaborated on the question though. If you still want to take that up, I hope it'll help him understand better. He's saying that he meant that the requirements went on hold for some time by the product owner, and maybe later on they came back again.
Okay, I think that's Abhishek, probably is a very specific problem of, may not have the product owner when we are saying requirements went on hold. It means it's clearly the product lacks some level of roadmap of what needs to be done next, right? So rather than holding a team towards, it's a, that's a very traditional approach where you just still keep the team with not giving any visibility to the team. Rather, you need to switch gears and get into a more of, build, measure, learn kind of loop, where you switch to there, you prototype a lot of things, test with your users, that's the level of leadership the product team has to drive with the engineering team, right? So I think that's what I have seen many times people missing out. They don't know what to do next because they have no idea what features they need to build next. Probably the next time if you come across, you should suggest this idea back to your product team.
All right, thank you so much, Avinash. I hope, Abhishek, it helps you. If you have any follow-up question, please feel free to type in, or you can also get in touch with Avinash on Twitter at the given ID or at his email address, which is also given on the screen. Meanwhile, while we get more questions, Avinash, would you like us to give a quick recap of the 3 approaches that you spoke about today? Just a very quick run through.
Yeah, definitely. I can. In general, we are talking about multi approaches towards handling any level of emergencies. More from mainly, I'm taking a scenario of a production incidents, urgent requests, urgent enhancements, and some requests getting upgraded as urgent requests, which may not be true. So trying to address them in more from an angle of taking multiple different approaches is what we need to take. From having a very strong product owner addressing, really doing a very good triage and rejection of features, or deferring it till upcoming sprints, so that by adding into the backlog and going through it, normal backlog prioritization cycle. Or you can always approach towards a more of an buffer based thinking, more of 80-20. I've even in one of my project I started with an 80-20 earlier, and with good level of root cause analysis done with every sprint, we were able to take to a level where it only was like around 95% and 5%. Gradually it was really once in a while more of production emergency coming up. Okay, so that's the kind of a path every Scrum team goes through. So there's nothing new that that you need to get it right from the start, but this is the evolution curve for any Scrum team. And applying a lot of more of within the sprint, we also talked about must-haves and should-have kind of thinking, and using should-have as one of the buffer technique to take up any kind of production emergencies. And later we talked about the Kanban, which is more of an approach of a flow model, which keeps very granular control on stories and very helpful when the things are highly dynamic in the product segment that you are focusing on, or it could be for multiple other reasons, either because of the market driven, or it could be something more from a product driven from the product management team, unable to make some decisions at larger decisions. So and later we talked about business entering into a pivot, product getting into more of a pivot state, wherein you have to get into we have to completely change the direction of your thinking, where the entire team is thinking from a very lean aspect, focusing more on what I'm building now is not really will be there in the product very soon. So it's going to be more of, I want to see where will I find my sweet spot among my users who are ready to pay for my product, who are ready to use my product, and who has got ready to adopt my product. Right, so that's a very important differentiation that you need to go when you achieve, when you get into more of a lean thinking. So these were the few of the things that we covered today, and even if you guys have any specific suggestions and topics that you want me to address in any of the upcoming webinars, I am happy to pick it up and probably share some ideas and thoughts on them. So do send across in either email or drop in on these chat messages. I will surely pick it up from here. So Priyanka, do we have any other questions? If not,
yes. Thanks a lot, Avinash, for the quick walkthrough. We have another question by Sandeep, who wants to know How do we handle queries from customers and other teams which involve debugging to answer the queries? To give a reference, he's given the context. He's saying that they're working on a product where more than 1,000 people are engaged in building the same product. The queries they get during the sprint are not really related to the new features, but they're more like how is it working currently. So, how do they go about handling such queries?
So, Sandeep, this is I need to understand from multiple. When you said 1,000 people building a product, so definitely, I'm pretty sure, if you're in such a kind of large product development, you need to have multiple Scrum teams, right? So, and you need to figure out. There are a lot of such questions comes, whether those Scrum teams are, more of feature teams or layer teams. When I say layer teams, more of, this is like, this is a UI team, this is a business layer team, this is a DB team. We don't want that kind of an approach. It could be a more of vertical slicing approach of feature driven teams, right? So a lot of these factors will decide in answering your question. So why don't you drop me, or either we can drop me more information. Probably we'll touch base, and probably I'll try my best after I hear more about all these aspects before we figure out how we could address those queries. Because the query handling can be done in multiple ways. It could be through techniques like Scrum of Scrums, wherein all the such teams come together and see interdependencies between the teams, or sometimes it's just a lack of knowledge within the product which is leading to a lot of queries coming up. Then the investment should go on building that knowledge within the trying to break any kind of knowledge islands that has been built over a period of time. So there could be multiple such things that we need to look at. Why this, there's more of a root cause analysis. How I would do with you is to identify them and then figure out what is the root cause, why this is coming up, and trying to address them. So please do drop more details on email and we can pick it up.
Right. Thank you so much, Avinash, once again.
Over to you, Priyanka.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. That was really a knowledgeable session, and I'm sure everybody found your presentation very interesting and insightful. And a big thank you to all our attendees for joining us today and participating in this conversation. I would also like to announce that our next webinar, titled 5 Things Decision Makers Need to Know About Drupal, would be hosted on 27th of May. This webinar would be led by Kay Van Valkenburg, who is the founder and Chief Learning Officer at Own Sourcing, a Boston-based Drupal shop with a strong focus on training and mentorship. Before we close, I would also request everyone that if you have any feedback, questions, or suggestions for us, please mail them at webinars@srijan.in. For registrations and more details of our next webinar, you would be getting a mail from our site. So stay tuned, and thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks a lot, Avinash.